There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch by there.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, folks, of course, we've been following this Gilgo case since the very beginning, the arrest of Rex Heuermann, and all of the people throughout, not just the world and locally, but, you know, the people that it's affected. And probably the biggest people who it's affected, of course, is the family of Rex Heuermann, his wife, his daughter, and his son. So we're going to take a look at how it affects them. And then we go to the neighborhood of Massapequa Park. Can you imagine living on that block and living around someone now who is the alleged Gilgo Beach serial killer? Can you imagine that? And how about, in a larger picture, the people of Suffolk County and Nassau County? The beach known as Gilgo Beach, that has been one of the most beautiful places probably in the world forever. Jones Beach. You say those names to Long Islanders and they get all like, oh, kinds of fond memories growing up. Long Island, Gilgo Beach, Robert Moses, Captree Boat Basin. You say those things. And now, though, with the list, the Long Island serial killer case, it's taken on new meaning. And people think of it, of Gilgo Beach as, oh, that spooky place. That scary place where those really bad things happened. And will that ever go away? We don't know, because right now, someone is arrested. Rex Heuermann is arrested. He arrested and charged with 3 of the murders of the women known as the Gilgo Four. And we hate to refer to people as that. We'd rather give them their own identity rather than calling them the Gilgo Four. And up on the screen, these are the real names of the people known as the Gilgo Four: Maureen Brainard-Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. So for their families, I don't know if there'll ever be what people always refer to as closure. I don't know if you ever get closure when you lose someone in the manner that they were lost. But we think of the families as an arrest has been made in this case, and everyone is sort of anxiously awaiting when the Suffolk County District Attorney, Ray Tierney, and the Suffolk County Police Commissioner, Rodney Harrison, makes the announcement that they have enough to arrest Rex Heuermann for the murder of Maureen Brainard-Barnes. It's coming. But they're not gonna rush themselves till they have absolutely probable cause in that case. And we are all looking forward to that moment, so that maybe 4 families, and again, I said use the word closure very carefully because I don't know if they'll ever have closure, but 4 families will have a pretty good idea what happened to their loved ones. And everyone is waiting again for the arrest of Rex Heuermann in the case of Maureen Brainard-Barnes. So tonight we're going to talk about the effects that this case and the arrest of Rex Heuermann has had on his family, has had on the people of Massapequa Park, has had on the people of Suffolk County, Nassau County, and again, all of Long Island. The effects of this case, and then to a larger extent, the state and the whole country. After all, serial killers are rare these days, very rare, because of technology. The ones we're uncovering now have been operating years ago, and they're just getting caught because of a lot of the new technology we have. Well, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my co-hosts, my guests, whatever you want to call them tonight. And we have with us retired NYPD Sergeant, Professor, law degree. Some people say fatherly, Father Mike Geary, but here he is. Welcome to the show. Mike Geary, how you doing, Mike?
Good, Billy. Thank you for having me on. Good evening.
Mike, someone in the chat said, Mike Geary does remind me of a priest. I go, don't let me make that suggestion and put that on him. But yeah, he is a little bit priestly in his actions and the way he speaks with a very soft voice. Anyway, Mike, welcome to the show. I know you're going to have some great things to say tonight. And from another hemisphere, retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. Welcome to the show tonight, Phil.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me. And Mike, if the lights were just a little bit darker, it might look like a confessional. So I could see
that'd be scary.
I could see the priestly, people talking about you being priestly. And if you want to give us a little blessing, I'll take it. You're the man,
you're right.
Mike. You're the man.
You're right, Phil. It could look like a confessional, but
because of the wood grain in the background there, a little bit darker, and boom, you're in a confessional.
Yeah, anyway. It almost makes me want to confess, not. But anyway, so let's talk about this, guys. Mike, your feelings about we've spent some time talking about the family and how they were totally, it appears to be, blindsided by this. They're moved out of their house. They're given this horrible news that the husband, the father, the police feel, the district attorney feels that he's the Gilgo Beach serial killer. What do you think, Mike?
Billy, that family is devastated. They've had their history, their life over the past, at least 20 years, going back to the marriage, raising the children, whether it was a happy marriage or not, we doubt it in terms of he probably wasn't the warmest, fuzziest, greatest dad going. However, he was their dad. He was the breadwinner in the family. There's a certain consistency, a certain normalcy that sets in. And whether it's a warm and nurturing place or whether he is a cold fish who doesn't really talk to the kids too much or the wife too much, and he has his own, separate life that they know that maybe he goes out and parties and things like that. They're used to that. That's their normal. That's their life. That encapsulates everything that is part of their experience with him. Now they find out suddenly he's wanted for not just like maybe committing a fraud or some sort of monetary crime like that, which would be bad enough, but it's actual homicide. It's not one, it's multiple homicides. And it's young women over the course of going back to at least 2010 that he's being charged with for killing 3 prostitutes. That's got to be devastating emotionally to the family. It flips you upside down completely. Their home was invaded by the police. They had to stay away. They come back. The house is a wreck. There's no getting back to that old normal. That's over. They have to try to come to grips with this and somehow recreate a life without him and a life that's peaceful, knowing what they know now. That's really difficult to do.
Absolutely. Phil, your thoughts upon this?
My thoughts of this, we know that obviously the victims in this case, those are the number one priority. Those are the victims. Obviously, secondary would be the families of the victims. And in my notes, I wrote down the third thing is kind of the untold story, which is the family of the perpetrator. In most cases, when a person is arrested, whether it be a homicide or any serious crime, in this case, he's a serial killer, killed multiple victims. He's accused of those crimes. However, he's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. However, we feel that this is the right perpetrator for these crimes. But that family had their whole world turned upside down. I mean, think about it. They could have been at dinner or the dinner table, even talking about the Gilgo Beach murders, which the dumping ground was very close by to their home. So I'm sure at some time in the last 13, 14, 15 years, it had to come up at some point. And again, just put yourself in that position. I really feel for the victims. I really feel for the victims' families. But could you imagine coming home one day and finding that your husband, father, had been arrested for these horrible, horrific crimes, and your whole world is turned upside down? As Mike pointed out, the house is taken over by the police for a period of 12 days. They do an extensive, extreme search, whether it be inside the house and the backyard. These people were definitely thrown into a frenzy. The fourth victim here is the public at large. And Bill, you brought that up. The area of Gilgo Beach and Massapequa, Long Island, and all that area, as well as the surrounding areas, the public at large, there was a certain level of fear in the community. I think through all of Long Island and in the New York City area generally, that perhaps this serial killer was out there and could kill again. And obviously, the main target was, because the thing that was in common was that most of the victims, if not all of the victims, except that toddler, were sex workers. So again, we don't know the extent of some of the other cases. The cases that he's been charged with, and one case, the Brainard-Barnes case, we believe he's going to be charged with. Again, very, very, upsetting to think about. So there is a lot of victims in this case, I guess is the point. And we're speaking about the untold victims, which is the family. Obviously, they've been victimized by this animal as well.
I want to play a little of this from CBS.
In this case, it's just agonizing. They've been going through this for years, and now today, finally, an arrest. CBS 2's Jennifer Bisram has that part of the story.
Hi, Dick. Rex Heuermann was officially charged in connection with 3 Gilgo Beach murders today. It is something Long Islanders have been waiting for a very long time, especially the victims' families.
I'm grateful for the hard work that's been done. I'm grateful that today is happening, and I'm hopeful for the future.
Finally, an arrest in the sprawling, years-long Long Island serial killer case.
Finally, something has been done, and finally somebody has been caught.
59-year-old Rex Heuermann of Massapequa was indicted Friday on 6 counts of murder in the gruesome deaths of 27-year-old Amber Costello, 24-year-old Melissa Bartholomew, and 22-year-old Megan Waterman. Their remains were found along Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach in Suffolk County more than a decade ago.
We breathe a great sigh of relief. Myself, after being on this case for 12 years and investigating this case relentlessly, and as well the victims' families.
John Ray represents some of the victims' families. He talked with reporters before Heuermann's arraignment at the Suffolk County Criminal Courthouse in Riverhead.
This is just the beginning.
In the courtroom, prosecutors say hair on the bodies of the 3 women who were sex workers linked them to Heuermann, who worked as an architect. They say he had burner phones with their information, and his computers had searches of not only the women he allegedly killed, but searches of their families, including their kids. They say he also searched Gilgo Beach murders hundreds of times.
I hope that she's remembered as a beautiful young woman, not what her occupation was at that time. And she's loved and missed every day.
20-year-old Jessica Taylor's remains were also found along Ocean Parkway back in 2011. While Heuermann was not charged in her murder, her family and their attorney believe it's only a matter of time before they connect him to her murder as well, along with several other unsolved murders on Long Island.
It's been surreal. I'm still shell-shocked. And like I said, I'm just grateful that today is happening. Full justice is all the cases being closed.
And again, attorneys representing a victim's family believe Heuermann is connected to more murders on Long Island. But again, victims' families telling us today, being inside that courtroom, listening to everything in there, they believe that this is finally a sense of closure. We are live from Riverhead. Jennifer Bisram, CBS.
So you can just see the pain on these families in regards to this arrest. I mean, does it give any closure, or is that a bad word even to use with this? I think that, when you lose someone, especially in this fashion, to a alleged killer, we'll use that word alleged, it's not easy for anyone to accept. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, it might not closure. Yeah, it's probably not the best word, but because then or healing or anything like that. But at least they have a sense of, conclusion, and that there's an answer to what happened to their loved ones, even if it's not good news, even if they kind of figured the person was no longer alive. This is it gives them some sort of conclusion, answers to their questions, and that's a good thing. Closure or healing, that might come much later, but for now, at least they have an answer, and that's important.
Phil?
Yeah, Billy, I just feel like the victims' families have gone through the loss, the initial loss, when the victims were missing, and then their remains were found a period later, up to a year or two later, and a lot of time passed, and perhaps. Listen, there's no such thing as closure in my book when you lose a loved one in this fashion. I think you're just able to live with it, so to speak, or to move forward to get past it. And I think that now that an arrest was made, it probably drew up some of the initial hurt, the initial pain, because now they're seeing the face of the animal that took their loved one's life. And now that the details may be coming out, they talked about perhaps some of these victims were killed inside the home. We had Dr. Joni Johnston on, and she talked about how he was the worst type of serial killer. Of course, there could have been an element of torture. So again, things like that these people now have to go through. They're reliving the trauma, and I think it's bringing it all back. And it's a terrible thing, but unfortunately for them, they do have to go through that so we can get justice in this case. I mean, some horrible details may come out at the trial. Again, that's going to, it's going to stir it up again, so to speak, for these people. And as far as his family, listen, we know that they're going through a terrible thing, and we know that their world was turned upside down. And I think the fact that we're even talking about it and recognize it is something that doesn't happen in most cases, where, you start to think about the victims, not the victim, the perpetrator's family. And, Bill, you and I, and maybe Mike too, we've met with families, when you make an arrest, sometimes the family comes to the precinct and you can see the hurt on their face as well, that now their loved one is being accused of this crime. Sometimes they're in denial. They don't believe it, but a lot of different emotions go on. So I think the fact that we're talking about it is probably a positive thing.
Absolutely. Let me play a little bit. This is about Rex Heuermann's family.
As the family of that suspected Gilgo Beach murder has returned home, of course, following this here on Live and Now from Fox. As the family there of the murder suspect, the Long Island serial killer suspect, Rex Heuermann, returned to their Long Island home after nearly 2 weeks since he was arrested. The intense police search of the Long Island home wrapped up on Tuesday, ending a 12-day hunt for evidence that involved ripping up the yard and discovery of a basement vault containing hundreds of weapons kept by the man accused of killing at least 3 women more than a decade ago. For more on this, let's go out to our Fox 5 team, Jody Goldberg, with the latest.
Asa Ellerup, the estranged wife of suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann, returned to her Massapequa Park home on Thursday with her children, shouting at reporters to go away before making a crude gesture. It's unclear if the family plans to stay in the home.
Only pictures, thank you.
Her son offered no comment as he carried a bed and bowls for the family dog after a walk. He came back outside and asked police for paper towels before wiping his head, getting a dog toy, and going back in. The family's return comes 2 days after detectives spent 12 days searching Heuermann's home to see if the man, who worked by day as an architect, could be connected to the murders of even more women. No parking signs are now posted on the street and around the corner from Heuermann's home. Officers are writing tickets for anyone who blocks traffic. Cameras are also installed for safety. The Suffolk County Sheriff's Office says Heuermann can make phone calls and receive mail in jail. Staff there is in the process of vetting incarcerated sex workers who have come forward claiming they've had contact with Heuermann. Now he's due back in court this Tuesday. District Attorney Ray Tierney says he plans to prosecute the case himself. In Massapequa Park, Long Island, Jody Goldberg, Fox 5 News.
So we can see there how obviously upheaval the family is in, upset they are. Rex Heuermann, besides being a husband and the father, was apparently their sole uh, support, financial support. Um, there's some talk within the neighborhood of Massapequa Park about the community buying the house and doing whatever. I mean, it sounds almost like Idaho, where the university wants to knock down 1122 King Road because it just gives a bad omen to the neighborhood, and it's become sort of like a tourist attraction. You know, many people, of course, with the Long Island serial killer, with Rex Heuermann, were curious and going out to Long Island to see the house. So this is where he lived, and I would imagine the family as well as the neighborhood wants no part of that, as it brings a bad sort of a bad scene onto the home. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, we talked a little bit about this, not only the families of the victims, the families of the perpetrator, the family of the perpetrator, but also the neighborhood. They don't need this. And you get this morbid curiosity. They've talked about the Amityville horror house from the 1970s. The neighborhood doesn't need this. Everybody needs to heal. Everybody needs to, put this in perspective to get past it. And come to terms with it, and to have the morbid people coming around, taking pictures, walking around. It's sad, and I'm glad the police are trying to harass people who might want to come around, look and take pictures and stop and slow down and do all that other stuff. I'm glad they're doing it, because you don't need that. The family doesn't need it. They're in distress. You could see that son, he's in distress. The mom, she's upset. She's making an obscene gesture. She just wants some sort of new normalcy where she could just live her life, and she's entitled to that. And so, it'd be great if people just gave her family that space.
Absolutely. There's been some new developments in the case, and one of them is that today a judge has ordered that Rex Heuermann be swabbed for a DNA exemplar that they can compare against, we'll call it the pizza crust, where the police surreptitiously obtained his DNA from a box of pizza that contained crust that he had undoubtedly eaten.
Canonism, surreptitiously.
Surreptitiously. And so I just want to play this quickly because they're going to do it with the lawyer present.
A judge ordered suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann to submit a DNA swab, despite his lawyer's objections. The judge said, contrary to the defense's contentions, there is probable cause to believe Heuermann committed the 3 murders with which he is charged. The swab will be taken in the presence of Heuermann's attorney. Investigators want to compare the sample with DNA recovered from a pizza crust discarded outside Heuermann's office and a hair recovered from one of the victims.
Mike, I know you answered this exact same question on one of our other shows, but why is the DNA that they surreptitiously recovered from the pizza box, from the pizza crust, why isn't that good enough? Why do they now have to get a direct DNA exemplar from Rex Heuermann in front of his attorney to compare against the evidence? And I think that you can explain it better than myself and Phil, so that's why I chose you to do so.
Okay. Yeah, Bill, just, we talked about the Kohlberger case with the touch DNA, and then they matched it to his a male relative of his father. And when they got the more probable cause on Kohlberger, then they got the cheek swab after they did the arrest in Pennsylvania. Now, the same thing here. It's very important that you make sure 100% you nail this down, that there can be no doubt as to the source of that DNA. In this case, the Gilgo Beach case, they've got female hairs that they matched up on one of the victims to the DNA, and it matched it up to the female living in the home with Heuermann. So they know that's his wife's DNA, because they went and they took bottles that were out for recycling, and they got saliva sample off the bottle. But now you also have the hair off one of the victims that's male hair, not female hair, and they want to match it to Heuermann's to see if it's his. And they got pizza crust that he threw in the garbage. All right, they took that and they believe that he licked it, he was chewing on it, he was touching it, and that's his DNA. And so they match it up, and those two pieces of DNA match. However, you want to make sure, beyond the shadow of a doubt, by getting a better sample from the cheek swab. I can't think of the name of it.
It's buckle, Buccal.
Yeah,
buckle swab
sample. Yeah. They want to make sure, just like they wanted to make sure with Kohlberger's DNA. And this way, in this case, if they get it and it matches, and they believe it's going to match, that's fabulous, because then that cuts off any sort of defense argument that there's another unknown third person hypothetically involved in the case, that maybe that unknown third person ate that pizza crust, and that pizza crust DNA belongs to some unknown person. Oh, not Rex Heuermann. Nope. It's somebody else. This way, you make that connection. It's unassailable. You've got his DNA on the pizza crust. You make sure it's his, and then that also matches up with the victim. So now you've got three sources of DNA all match up to Heuermann, and it cuts out any sort of defense argument that there may somehow be a mysterious man, not Rex Heuermann, involved in this case.
Bill, can I just
yeah, go ahead.
But Bill, I just want to piggyback what Mike just said a little bit. You really explained it very well, Mike. There was one thing in the judge's decision that I think really says a lot, and it kind of knocks out the defense objection to this DNA being taken. It says the DNA swab will yield probative material evidence, whether it be inculpatory or exculpatory. Exculpatory would mean it's not his. Inculpatory would mean it's his. So the judge makes that point that, yes, we're going to do this swab because this is going to say A, it's his, or B, it's not his. So I think that really says everything right there. And one other thing, Mike, I don't really lick pizza crust. I just chomp right down on it, swallow it, because I love pizza. I really enjoy pizza.
Good to know.
Thanks for that information. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, and give us a thumbs up. And if you want to support us financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels. And I'm seeing folks, brand new members coming by that have been Judy, brand new YouTube channel member. We see all the folks with the green font in the chat. We appreciate all you guys. Thank you so much for the support for the Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I know a few others went by. I'm trying to find you in the chat, but it's going way back. I could just say I thank you, all you YouTube channel memberships, and I'll do a shout out to you guys later on. But it's so great that you support us, and it's so very much needed. Thank you so much to our Patreon and our YouTube members. There's a lot of new things going on in this case relative to evidence, and also relative to the fact that with 4 people, with the charges going against 4 victims, there is still 7 more bodies. One being I believe a toddler, a 2-year-old toddler, and an unidentified victim by the name of Peaches, who was just identified from a tattoo on her body. And that's all they're really identifying. And just very recently, Karen Vergata, who had been missing since 1996, has been identified. And all of this, of course, is through investigative genetic genealogy. So there's a good possibility that in the very near term, these other unidentifieds on Gilgo will be identified through, again, investigative genetic genealogy. And that type of thing, of course, for families that have missing persons and don't know what happened to them, again, this is welcomed. And with Law and Crime, I want to pull up a little bit of this. They speak about some of this new information.
They've been doing a lot of forensic work, DNA, for quite some time now, ever since the task force was put together. And obviously, one of the first things you're going to look for is you're going to try to identify the unidentified who were dumped tragically along Ocean Parkway. That's going to give you numerous clues as to whether Rex is responsible for them. So we've always known that identifying these people was so important to this case. It was just released that they found that they have identified Karen Bergata. And now we believe Peaches is going to come. We believe also that they've known this information for quite some time, but they wanted to, not scare away Rex Heuermann, basically by releasing this information, and then just kind of get that indictment out of the way.
Do you think that Peaches is connected and the toddler to Rex Heuermann? Because, we've got the Gilgo 4 who were found in camouflage burlap in, a smaller area, but then we have all these other bodies and remains along the longer stretch of Gilgo Beach.
I mean, that's the big question, and that's one of the biggest mysteries of this case and kind of why it's so fascinating. The Gilgo Beach 4, very much the same MO. 4 women found all wrapped in camouflage burlap, all found intact. Again, tragically, all taken around a certain time period. And then we have all these other victims, but dismembered. And they're found kind of like scattered all up and down the highway around these women. The question is whether or not the MO indicates that we're dealing with one serial killer or two. I've gone back and forth over the years. Now, with some information that's come out, I do believe we're probably talking about one individual. And the reason we have 2 different MOs is because of time. We are talking over the course of 26 years. People evolve, get lazy, they get comfortable.
Joe, let's go back to Peaches just briefly. They had been pursuing leads on Peaches since last year. I mean, these things take time. Even if you get the genetic genealogy going, you get some company like Othram Labs on board, it takes time to perform that work. So talk to me a little bit about what Mobile police were looking into in Alabama. They were trying to locate certain people.
Right. So it's actually kind of interesting because for those of us that follow it, you pick up on these things pretty quickly. The FBI had actually sent out a tweet asking for information in regards to connection to a Long Island case. They didn't mention the actual Long Island case, but we knew that Peaches was definitely the case that they were referring to. So that was kind of an interesting tell going back a few months ago. And we know that, law enforcement keeps things close to the vest, right? So we know they had a suspect in mind for the other case, like Josh said. You don't want to spook them. And there's another, situation when you're looking at the way they picked them up and when they picked them up, they kind of rushed that whole thing at the end to arrest them because maybe they knew something else was going to happen, or they had some other information that maybe there was some other evidence that could have been destroyed or what have you. We'll find that all out, in due time. But it's just interesting for us observers and for those of us that worked in this industry, we kind of look at some of these things as tells. And you just wonder what's next. And I think there's going to be a lot of things coming out in the next few weeks.
Interesting. What do you think's coming out in the next few weeks, Joe? Because you're a veteran in this business of solving crimes. So read the tea leaves for us. Tell us what you think is coming.
Well, I think we're going to have the identity of either all of the victims or at least, we're going to have Peaches. That's going to come out, I think, within a few weeks. And I think we're going to have Gilgo 4 wrapped up in respect to Maureen Brainard-Barnes, that charge being levied against Rex Heuermann. I think they're just waiting for the DNA to come back from that. So we wait for the press conference release. I think I was kind of thought when I saw the press conference release, I thought that's what this was going to be about and not about Karen Bergata because that was kind of a surprise for me, or a disappointment, however you want to look at it. But I think there will be another press release shortly naming Maureen Brainard-Barnes as a victim of Rex Heuermann. And then we seem to forget about the Asian male in this case too. And I think that they've been working diligently on that one too. And like what Josh had said before, from a law enforcement perspective, you want to try to identify who your victims are because it plays an important role in your investigation. It gives you a starting point. It gives you that what we refer to as victimology, building what you were doing at the time, who you were with, your friends, your family, because they might have some clues into what happened to you that day. And it's very important that we do so.
I'm intrigued by the Asian male because it's the only man that we know of found the remains found along Gilgo Beach. I have my own kind of theories about that, but I'm wondering if they do indeed believe the Asian male is also connected to Rex Heuermann, if he's found to be responsible for all of these. I mean, he's innocent.
You know, I just want to mention a few things. And of course, the commonality and the patternable things, and we talk about it all the time, what links these cases together, the one big thing is they were sex workers, right? And then, of course, geography, where they were left. Is that coincidental? No, it's not coincidental. Is Rex Heuermann responsible for all of these? I don't know. I think when we discussed this off the air, I think there's one he probably did not do, and that is Shannon Gilbert. And I think that they have a lot of information on that. And I would be very, very surprised if he was involved in that one. Because look, she called 911 that night. She was delivered there by a driver. She met a certain John. So there's a lot of information known by that. So it's not fitting his type of MO. She disappeared that night. So to believe that he was involved in that, I think it's a huge stretch. Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you, Billy. We talked about it before we went on the air. There was so much put forward in that particular case with regard to what you said. They interviewed the person who was the John. They interviewed the driver. She made, I believe it was 2 911 calls, if I'm not mistaken. And she ran into the marsh. So initially they had labeled it as an accidental, that perhaps she went into this area, lost her bearings. It was cold out, hypothermia, perhaps water. And they ruled it as an accident. I really believe, though, with the fact that they now have Rex Heuermann in custody for these other homicides, if they had enough to tie him to that one, I think that would have been included already. And that's why I'm really 100% in agreement with you, Billy. I don't think he's responsible for this one. It seems really the realm of what he was doing. I think that reporter in that last piece you played made a great point with regard to the fact that the MO might have changed. Perhaps he ran out of those burlap bags. He had only 3 or 4 of them, and that's why the MO could have changed. A long period of time went on before those, in between those homicides. So again, that could have something to do with the change in MO. So I agree with that reporter, and I agree with you, Billy. I don't think Shannon was part of this Rex Heuermann's rampage.
Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Billy, yeah, Phil's right. It doesn't look like his MO whatsoever. Remember earlier on with the girl who went missing, and the boyfriend pretended to be the gentleman that she lived with was pretending to be her boyfriend. He skedaddled out of that house the moment the boyfriend confronted him, and they kept the money. So he's going to be very skittish about this. He's going to be really careful. And if somebody's calling 911 and he's not going to be following them down the street, chasing after him, no way in hell. She's calling 911 on a cell phone. If it was him, he would have been out of there a long time ago. That doesn't fit his MO at all. Of course, obviously MOs can change, but yeah, I doubt it that it's his whatsoever. However, we also have to realize that with the bodies being outside and the passage of time and the loss of any sort of evidence, that there may be several of the bodies that have been found that we won't ever know who may have caused their deaths. And, we have to be prepared for that eventuality.
Absolutely. Let me play a little bit more of this from Law and Crime.
Until proven guilty. What's your theory on the Asian male, Josh? I know what I'm kind of kicking around in my head, but I'm wondering, as somebody who's been following this for years, what you think.
I mean, the Asian male is really intriguing because it doesn't fit within the victimology, right? First of all, we're talking about a transgender individual, a petite Asian male wearing wearing women's clothing. So all the other victims were found nude. This is the only victim who's found wearing clothing. And also, this was the only victim who we can tell was savagely beaten. So what does that mean? And probably, and this is, speculation, of course, that there was some rage against this individual by the killer. Maybe he was tricked, and that led to this rage. That led to a different style of MO. I am intrigued because if he's tricked and he felt like this didn't belong in his other, if you want to call it, trophy garden, why he would deposit this victim there, but still he did. Asian male has been something that we've gone down the rabbit hole looking for, and I'm really intrigued as to what we're going to find about that.
And that was my theory on the Asian male. What if the Asian male, if transgender, is posing as a female escort or what have you? I'm trying to choose my words carefully here and use the proper verbiage, but Joe, that's what I think. Like,
not being a behavioral analyst or psychologist or forensic psychologist, I don't put anything by a Rex Heuermann, a serial killer. Just look at some of the things he searched on his computer. And could his MO change? Could it change to that he wanted to meet a sex worker, say, that was transgender? That's a distinct possibility. Was he fooled? Is that they're saying, oh, he was fooled, and thus that's what enraged him, and that's why there were signs that the transgender Asian male was beaten to death. I don't know. Again, I don't put anything by Rex Heuermann. He's a psychosexual degenerate. He's a psychosexual sadistic type of killer. So why would we be surprised at anything that he would do? Phil?
100%, Billy. And I think that, listen, if it's him, it could be that this Asian transgender person fit the MO of what he was looking for, a petite woman. Then he finds out it's a man and he goes into a rage. That's quite possible. Or it could be there's another person that is out there that killed this transgender person for the same type of reason. Or it could be what you just said, Billy. Perhaps that's what he was looking for. We don't know what his sexual appetite was at that point. And perhaps because the fact that it was a male, he didn't kill in the same way that he killed the other victims. He went into this violent rage and, beat the person to death, apparently, is what they're saying. It's suffered a very violent death. So again, there's a lot of possibilities there. And again, you pointed out he's a psychosexual sadist and a degenerate, as we know. So it's kind of hard to get into the mindset of someone like that. I mean, we've studied serial killers before, and we kind of get an idea of some of the things they do, like with regard to trophies and stuff like that. But again, does this person fit into the pattern of what we see? Doesn't seem like it. And perhaps that's the reason why that there was the violent ending.
Regina Carter, I've read this before, and I think you're probably right. He Googled Asian twink, and John Doe fits that description. Regina, thank you. As I said, I've heard this before. And look, as I said, I don't put anything by a psychosexual sadistic killer. What would, why would we be surprised that he would do anything outside the norm? And again, we talk about MO, we talk about signature. Yeah, it deviates from both of those things. But the commonality, which I'm always interested in, is A, a sex worker, B, the geography as to where the body was dumped. And that fits this pattern. Mike.
Yeah, Billy. Yeah, there's always going to be that evolution of MO over the course of several decades. He could have started killing in 2010, but the odds are he probably had done it before, and he may have had many other trysts with sex workers and not killed them at all. Just paid them for their services and moved on. Based on the timing of it, when his wife was away, family around. If we had some information about the Asian male, about approximately when he disappeared, if we knew when he disappeared, it would be wonderful to see if that matched up with Heuermann's wife being present or away from home. So there's a lot of possibilities, and I'm sure the detectives are working every single possible angle that they could think up, rather than say yes on the Asian male or no on the Asian male.
Absolutely. BB Diamond, also Asian twink would more than likely be someone not missed right away, in my opinion. I think you could be right there. The fact that he chose, sex workers as his victims, that's true for sex workers of all sexes. So that they're not, people aren't going to report them missing as readily. Mike, you raised a great point that I want to, and it's part of the investigation, is that how many sex workers did he have trysts with that he didn't kill? That is hugely, hugely important. And that's why I think it was unique to get the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office involved in regards to their sex unit inside the jail, and to interview some of these women workers to ascertain if they had ever run into Rex Heuermann.
Billy, the burner phones, his burner phones are going to yield a ton of information on calls that he made. And I'm certain that they got to be looking into those calls that he made to see the other sex workers and interview them as well, and find out what the movements were. And like you said, we both believe that he may have, had encounters with other sex workers and not killed them. We kind of feel that maybe he would lead up to that. But one quick thing I wanted to point out about that last person put in the chat, in the bail application, number 12 of the things that he searched, Asian twink tied up porn. That may account for this unidentified Asian transgender person. If you look at that, if you go into that 32-page bail application, there's so much information in there. But if you look at, I don't even want to read some of the things, they're so disgusting. The things that he searched on his computer with regard to pornography, child pornography, and all the different sadistic things, it really gives you a good profile of the mindset of Rex Heuermann and what his sexual appetite was.
Based on all of this evidence, to me, when they talk about, and we've all covered the Brian Koberger case in Idaho and the murders of those 4 Idaho students, and that has been looked upon as having a treasure trove, like an unbelievable amount of evidence. And it appears that in this case, there is a tremendous amount of evidence, both forensic and digital evidence, that I think will, look, no case is easy, but makes it look, for all of those that say, oh, Rex Heuermann didn't do it, then there's always groups of those people. I just think there is so much evidence that just can't get there in any other way than you have the right person. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, we looked at tremendous amount of stuff being taken out of the house. Now, out of all that stuff, hopefully some of it will yield good and valuable evidence that we could use in court against Heuermann. However, a lot of it probably won't be useful because it'll be inconclusive. If there's DNA, it might be very old, it might be degraded. We're not sure. But all that stuff that was taken out, boxes and truckloads of it, most of it probably won't yield anything incriminating. It might be interesting. We saw a big rubber doll in like a glass coffin. We saw porno magazines and all kinds of other crazy stuff kind of around his house. But how much of it is really going to be relevant and reliable evidence of his guilt? Probably very little. But all you need out of all that stuff, if you just have some hairs, you have some skin, you have some blood, you have some sort of, a liquid, that sort of thing, and it was in decent shape in terms of being sheltered from heat and moisture and things like that, and it didn't degrade, you might be able to use it, and that's where we're at. There, all of that stuff that was taken out, some of it will be valuable. Probably the vast majority of it will be interesting, but may not really yield anything that can be used against them.
Mike, think about the crime scene. We are very lucky that those 4 hairs were preserved for that a period of time, and I think that was really that what put this whole case together. Those 4 hairs being preserved for that long period of time, probably in that burlap. They probably got caught up in that burlap, and that kind of saved the day and linked him to these crimes. And then from there, you get all the other evidence, but that's probably going to be the most damning of evidence. And I think you made a great point there, Mike, that, out in the elements, a period of time, a year or so, and we were able to recover hairs that turned out to be linked to him and his wife. Super, super lucky on that one.
Today, Ray Tierney was interviewed by Newsday, and so was Rodney Harrison. So I think there seems to be like a little bit of potentially headbutting as to who's going to be the spokesperson for this case.
Police searching the brush and sand at Gilgo Beach first uncovered the victims back in 2010. 13 years later, a suspect is behind bars, charged with 3 of the killings. And the Suffolk District Attorney is planning to prosecute the case himself.
When I took office in January of 2022, I made Gilgo a priority.
DA Ray Tierney is sitting down with Newsday TV for a one-on-one interview and talking about why it took so long to make an arrest, where the case goes from here, and why he's taking the lead in the courtroom. Welcome to Newsday Studio 2 in Melville, and our conversation with Suffolk District Attorney Ray Tierney. So let's talk a bit about Gilgo, if that's okay with you, right? Gilgo has attracted a lot of attention nationally and internationally from all over the place, right? But you and I both live here, along with 2 million or so other Long Islanders. What's the current state of the investigation?
So we've indicted the defendant on 3 of what has traditionally been called the Gilgo 4 murders. We're still working on the 4th murder, which is the murder of Maureen Brainard-Barnes. Those are allegations. He's charged with murder of the 3 other victims. There are allegations. We look forward to proving them in court. And when we came into office in January of 2022, we started the task force. March 14th of 2022, we identified Rex Heuermann as a suspect. And basically, we were off and running, proceeding with our investigation. And we charged 3 out of the 4. And now that we're at that point, we went overt. We executed a number of search warrants. So we're preparing that case for trial. We're continuing to investigate those murders, as well as the murder of Maureen Brainard-Barnes. And we've expanded the investigation to the other bodies on Gilgo. So there's a lot of work to be done.
For us, being former New York City cops and investigators, for us, it's very strange for a district attorney. 2 parts here. The district attorney, not an assistant district attorney, is prosecuting the case. I've never seen Robert Morgenthau ever prosecute a case. I never saw that, nor have I ever seen any of the 5 borough district attorneys in New York City prosecute. So to me, that smells of politics. The other thing is, I've never, ever seen the district attorney be the spokesperson for a case this large. It would always be the police department. So I'm finding this to be a little bit unusual. Am I wrong?
Oh,
Mike,
Billy.
Let me go to Mike first, and then
go ahead. I'm going to jump in after. I got it.
Yeah, Billy. It is unusual, and I don't think it's a good idea. He may say something, because He wants to, a pat on the back. He wants to say really great complimentary things. He may go too far, say something that may not be true. And then later on, it can be used against him because it'll go to his credibility. It would be much better if there was a prepared statement by the county executive's office or by the police department's office, like the county police, that sort of thing, a prepared statement, and leave it at that. Because I think reporters know at this point that there's not going to be a lot of give and take because the investigation is still ongoing and there's a lot of work to do, and they don't want to give away anything that they may have right now. They want to time everything. And so therefore, I don't think it's a good idea whatsoever for Ray Tierney to do any of these interviews whatsoever.
Billy,
ahead,
I've
Phil.
never, ever, ever seen a prosecutor do a sit-down interview before going into the trial. This is ridiculous. A press conference, yes. We made an arrest, your press conference, you have a court appearance, you give a press conference. A sit-down interview? This is really unheard of, and it's really getting me upset. I never seen anything like it before, and I really wish the judge would perhaps issue a gag order just to shut him up. He's all over the place with this. Did you ever see, Bill, I've never heard of a sit-down interview in that format before you go on a trial on such a thing like a serial killer, all these murders. I'm just out of my mind watching this. I had no idea that this took place. This is really out of the realm. The spokesperson should be the police department for regarding the investigation. Once we go into the court phase, if the press conference after a court appearance, the DA wants to give the press conference, that's fine. And again, Billy, you made the point. Since when does the sitting district attorney prosecute the case? Very, very rare, if not at all. I just can't even believe what I just witnessed on that video. He's doing a sit-down interview. Terrible.
Lula Morocco, thank you so much for the $20 super sticker. The absolute absurdity and disrespect for the victims and their families. DA Tierney not investigating Shannon Gilbert's death further is an injustice to the very law itself. Despicable. Well, we're questioning as to why he's the spokesperson. But curiously, and look, everyone out there knows the respect that we have for Rodney Harrison. Former NYPD detective, former NYPD chief of department, former NYPD chief of detectives, 30 years with the NYPD. He's the one that brought NYPD know-how to Suffolk County and established that task force. So guess what? Newsday, not to be outdone, interviews Rodney Harrison in the same, I think it was the same day.
From day one, he promised to focus on the Gilgo Beach killings.
Grateful for the partnership, the teamwork that came together, being able to then catch that green avalanche to Mr. Heuermann, got this case going in the right direction.
So where's the investigation heading now that Rex Heuermann has been charged and another Gilgo victim has been identified? Suffolk Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison is sitting down with Newsday TV for a one-on-one conversation about the Gilgo killings. Hello and welcome to Studio 2 in Newsday's Melville headquarters for this Newsday TV one-on-one conversation with Rodney K. Harrison, Suffolk County's Police Commissioner. Welcome, Commissioner, and thank you for being here and for talking to Newsday TV and our Long Island audience about the ongoing Gilgo investigation.
Thank you for having me.
You made Gilgo killings a priority from day one of your administration, going so far as to visit Ocean Parkway, I believe on the day you were sworn in 2021. So what were you thinking on the way there?
Yeah, there's a lot of backstories to why I went there so early on in my time frame as the newly sworn in police commissioner. I had a conversation with the county executive, Steve Ballone, and there were a couple of things that he asked me to take a closer look at. And there was a reform plan that he wanted to have implemented. But also, I think one of the main reasons why he nominated me to be police commissioner because of my investigative background. I did 30 years in NYPD. Out of that, 12 years, I was part of conducting investigations or overseeing them. So one of the things that I thought would be important to me to kind of get a little bit of a better understanding is take a look at where the crime scene is and see what was there. Is there something that we could have missed? Is there something that the investigators for the last 12 years could have did a little bit better with? And that's something that I learned during my time frame in the city as being the detective, being a sergeant in the detective squad, as well as being the chief of detectives. It's always good to take a look at the crime scene and evaluate what's there and what can we do better to get the investigation going in the right direction. And that's one of the main reasons why I went over there, and I thought it was instrumental, just me taking a look at the landscape of Ocean Parkway and what's going on in that area.
Well, interesting. Shortly thereafter, or sometime thereafter, you said, "I believe this case is solvable."
Yeah.
From my brief interview with what's been done so far, I like our chances. I like our chances.
No one before you, to my recollection, had ever said anything like this before.
Yeah, so I think every case is solvable. I think the most important thing is providing the appropriate resources to an investigation. And that's one of the things that I want to believe that I brought to this investigation is identifying dedicated investigators to this case. One of the things that I quickly learned after speaking to my Detective Lieutenant Kevin Byer, that they had one investigator assigned to the case and he was still catching other cases. And just knowing what I know and just knowing from my time frame in the city, I knew that was going to get the job done. And we had to take people out of what's called catch.
You know, that's incredible. I mean, I never knew that. They had one detective assigned to the Gilgo case before he got there, and he was catching other cases. That's ridiculous.
Absurd.
It's absurd. I mean, coming from where we're coming from, are you kidding me? Like, and he's talking about one of the main things that he wanted done was the resources. Yeah, you got to slap X amount of detectives to the case, and let's get serious. You know, and
Billy,
then,
what were you and I talking about earlier today? I was saying to you, I'd like to go out there and just get a read on the location where the bodies were dropped. That's what he said. You want to get a feel so like you can put in perspective the things you know about the case. If you know that it's pitch black there and it would be very, very difficult for a person once you turn off the car lights to be spotted. All of those things I think are so very important. I would want to get a feel, and I know right now is not the time, but I'd even want to drive by the house just to get an idea of what the atmosphere was at the house, to drive from the house to the location, you know, just to see what the time frame would be, see what the surroundings would be. And I try to do it either in the early evening or going into when it's dark out. So, because we know he wasn't doing this in broad daylight. So that's one of the first things that he said. He wanted to get a feel for the crime scene. That's what detectives do. We read the crime scene. So very important.
Orders and pretty much dedicate them to solely investigating this homicide. That's really long overdue of being closed out or identifying a subject. So it was a nice eye opener for me. After I was briefed by Detective Lieutenant Kevin Byer regarding, the landscape of who was investigating it, I asked Kevin and said, "Listen, this is what we're going to do going forward. I want a sergeant. I want at least 2 detectives dedicated and assigned to this case," and that got the ball rolling.
Well, it's interesting because you did mention your time in the city, but you've also worked with other people, DA Ray Tierney and Suffolk Sheriff Dr. Errol Toulon. They all worked in New York City too.
Mm-hmm.
So did that perspective between city and suburb, that perspective kind of help you in taking a different look at this case?
So my relationship with Ray Tierney, we did some work together while I was a chief of detectives in Brooklyn North, and he was a assistant district attorney working under Eric Gonzalez, the DA out there. And we did a couple of conspiracy gang takedowns out there. Really great work, partnering up with Eric Gonzalez and Ray Tierney during that time frame. I didn't have much of a relationship with Earl, but I knew of him. I knew he was a solid law enforcement official out here, and I knew.
Folks, you can listen to all of Rodney Harrison, as I'm going to do when the show's over, but he's a very, very humble guy. very talented guy, very humble. And, you know, when you hear some of the things we're hearing now, that one detective was assigned to this case, like, are you kidding me? Roger Still, thank you so much for the $5 super sticker. I mean, if this was, you know, look, you can't always, oh, if this was the NYPD, that's what we know. There would have been day one, an entire task force working on this case, not 10 years later, 11 years later. And the fact that, and look, I deserve a smack for what I said early in this case. The fact that that evidence of Rex Heuermann's Chevy Avalanche and a man fitting his description going to the house, and that sat dormant in a case folder and no one acted upon it, that's disgraceful. You know, that is really absolutely disgraceful. And it wasn't, I don't think it was totally, not giving myself an alibi, totally clear to me that he was that readily identified. In fact, from what I understand, 2 months into the task force, a member of the New York State Police, using what's called a lawman search, a computer database, was able to identify the owner of that avalanche as being Rex Heuermann. And that's where this case started to snowball. So,
but Billy, wasn't there a question as to when that information was garnered? Was it garnered way back in 2010? I think in one of the press conferences, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, that Ray Tierney said they got the information the last couple of years. Now, I know even in the last couple of years is a little bit of a long time, but if it was there from 10 years ago, yeah, that's pretty terrible that it sat there that long before that.
I think the information sat in the case folder for that long, and no one acted upon it, which we cannot understand that. If that's true, that's horrific. That is really.
Did you notice how Rodney Harrison didn't talk about the specifics of the evidence of the case? He was talking about what happened when he first got there. Whereas Tierney, I think he just talks way too much. He should not be doing a sit-down interview. I mean, you know, Harrison doing it, and he's talking about his experience before he even got to be police commissioner in Suffolk County. He's talking about what he found when he got there. All of that's fine. I don't think anything, detrimental to the case is going to be revealed on that end. But again, the prosecutor should not be given sit-down interviews. I can't stress that enough.
You know, it's surprising to me that it turns out that Tierney was a Brooklyn ADA. You know, you would think that he wouldn't. I don't know. Let's not beat that to death. Phil.
Joe Murray, attorney at law. Now, listen, guys. If you yourself in the jam and you're in need of legal counsel in the New York area, there is none better than Joe Murray. Joe Murray is not only a terrific criminal defense attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of defense. And he was on the boxing team. So if he takes your case, he might be able to deliver that knockout punch. You can get a hold of Joe at jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702. Or you can email Joe at jmurray-law.com. Joe's a big supporter of police off-the-cuff real crime stories, and Rex Heuermann probably wishes he had Joe Murray as a defense attorney.
You know, this case also we talk about the Shannon Gilbert case and how potentially it's not part of this investigation. How she has an attorney who's been following this case for all those years that Shannon Gilbert's been missing, and her remains have been found. And I mean, whether it's part of this, it has to be investigated as diligently and as much resources put to it as if it was part of the whole Gilgo Beach task force. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, Billy, the idea that you find 4 girls in burlap in a dune, all right next to each other, and you don't have a task force, and the resources that you expend is one detective who's actually catching other cases in their case file, is shocking. I'm flabbergasted. I can't even believe that would even happen. But that explains a lot about why this investigation really did not move along in any way, shape, or form until it was given the proper resources it needed. That's shocking. Yeah, and I'm sure Sharon Gilbert's case is now, along with once they had that task force in 2020, 2021, that I'm confident that her case is being investigated with as much vigor as all the other Gilgo 3 girls, and Brainard-Barnes is number 4. So I don't think that she's getting her file or her homicide is getting the short shrift. I think they're doing it, probably giving it an excellent amount of resources and a lot of time and efforts being expended at this point.
Schmitty, thank you for the $5 super sticker. The love for Professor Geary makes us all jealous. You know, Professor Geary was probably quite the force on the force from what I see. You still are, sir. I appreciate your calming presence. It speaks volumes. Professor Geary will be hearing confessions after the show.
Oh my goodness, you guys are rough. You guys are rough.
I'm first for the confession.
Thank you, Schmitty.
Angie Zizilieta. I hope I pronounced that right. Thank you for the $5 super sticker. Does Heuermann still have a public defender rather than private counsel?
Yes.
Angie, what Heuermann
18B.
has is 18B attorney, which are private attorneys that volunteer to take what the state will pay them to represent indigent clients. Usually an 18B attorney, some of them are really damn good attorneys, as this guy Brown, who is Heuermann's attorney, appears to be, based on his appearances in front of the media. He seems like a really sharp guy, and he seems like he's really, really on top of this case. So he doesn't have legal aid, and I'm not going to put down legal aid, but legal aid is sometimes not as experienced as 18B attorneys. And some of them, well, there's many legal aid attorneys, though, that do have a lot of trial experience. But 18B, usually I think that's one grade up from legal aid.
Billy, can I make a quick point about in the NYPD, when we had a major case in 1998, we had a police officer, Ralph Doles, who was off duty. He was shot and killed. He was executed. And we started a task force. Over time, it took quite a number of months and years to actually make the arrest on that case. But when it tailed down, when detectives went back to their commands, the task force originally was probably about 20 or 25 detectives. All different units within the NYPD were on it in the beginning. A lot of good work came out of it. A lot of arrests were made related to other things. And then at some point, it tailored down. Detectives went back to their commands, and they started just two detectives from the Brooklyn South Homicide Squad and one detective from the detective squad where the homicide took place. And we called it a war room. They had a war room, so they never let the case go, so to speak, down to just one detective that was catching cases as well as working on that homicide. And again, the Brooklyn South Homicide Office, like I said, it had 2 detectives, and there were bosses as well right there. There was several sergeants and a lieutenant, and they kept the bosses up to date on what they were doing, and eventually arrests were made in that case. So it did seem like a real lack of resources there, that you have one detective catching cases, other cases, and he's the detective assigned to, over about a dozen murders. So again, that did seem a little bit odd, and I didn't know that until tonight when we watched that.
As this case moves forward, we learn more and more about probably the what went on before this task force was founded. And as we learn more and more, it gets more and more egregious, what we're hearing. And perhaps, the whole thing, they talk about the thing with Chief Burke, the way they didn't include the FBI, the way they didn't bring in outside investigators, the district attorney's office, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, the New York State Police. Inexcusable for a case this size. The word serial killer right away says all hands on deck. Get the best people we have in the state, the best people we have in the country. Let's put a task force together. The fact that wasn't done years ago, again, I'm guilty of supporting the police maybe too much and blinded. But the more I'm hearing now about this, it was not a good thing. Kathy, thank you so much for the $9.99 super sticker. Great panel. Love this show. Thank you so much, Kathy. I want to play a little bit of Mary Murphy here.
Fight to get the attention of law enforcement because the women were categorized as sex workers. Relatives of the victims often held vigils here and demanded they get treated with dignity. Now they've seen the face of the accused killer.
He just looks like a cold monster. And in his eyes, I mean, you can just see that it's like a sociopath.
Victim Amber Costello's aunt watched the serial killer case unfold from her home in North Carolina. Other families somberly followed District Attorney Ray Tierney into court when the gruesome indictment was unsealed. One of them was the younger sister of victim Melissa Barthélemy. The sister was just 15, according to family, when the accused killer made taunting phone calls in 2009 using Barthélemy's cell phone.
Is this Melissa's little sister? That's how he started out the conversation. Is this Melissa's little sister? And she answered yes.
Megan Waterman.
Is that as spooky as it gets, that a serial killer using the phone of the deceased speaks to a family member of the deceased and taunts her? Does it get any worse than that? In regards to that, again, we call them a psychosexual sadistic, a sadist, and that they get pleasure from inflicting pain on others. Does it get any worse than that, Mike?
A sick son of a bitch.
You know, Billy, that shows a tremendous amount of assuredness in his confidence that he's not going to get caught. And thankfully, he didn't know cell phone technology, and that helped, pin him down. But just imagine how confident you have to be in your abilities and covering your tracks to sit there and take a phone and call the victim's family and actually ask for a little sister of the person that you are accused of killing. That's cold. That's really sick. And that shows a tremendous confidence in your abilities. And I'm glad he's caught. That is scary.
Absolutely.
Waterman's daughter was just 3 when her mother disappeared.
Doubtless.
This surveillance shows Megan Waterman, just 22, in the early hours of June 6, 2010, shortly before she left the Holiday Inn Express in Hauppauge, Long Island, to meet a client. Prosecutors say that John was architect Rex Heuermann, based on calls from a burner phone he allegedly bought the day before Waterman met her demise.
And for each of the murders, he got an individual burner phone, and he used that to communicate with the victims.
Amber Costello, 27, was the last of the Gilgo 4 to disappear. Court papers indicate her roommate and pimp tried to act like an outraged boyfriend when the suspect allegedly showed up at their Babylon rental on September 1st, 2010, looking for sexual services.
They wanted to rip him off.
Heuermann allegedly texted Amber Costello saying, "That was not so nice. Do I get credit for next time?" Her roommate watched her leaving the house the next day, taking nothing with her.
He was really worried because when she went out the door, she didn't take her purse or her cell phone. He was like, "You're forgetting them." And she said, "I'm not going to need them."
Amber Costello's body was discovered 3 months later with the Gilgo 4 on Ocean Parkway.
He's huge. None of these girls stood a chance against him.
The Long Island serial killer investigation involved painstaking phone analysis, the search for better DNA technology, and the hope that a tip would come in that would change everything. The Gilgo Beach Task Force tracked Rex Heuermann for more than a year with physical and digital surveillance. A 32-page court affidavit claimed prosecutors had images of Heuermann buying extra minutes on his burner phones, hoping they weren't traceable. But experts did eventually trace his burners, they say, and some victims' phones to cell sites near Heuermann's place of work in Midtown Manhattan and 4 cell towers in Massapequa Park that were close to his home.
And that was mapped out. That was called the box.
It wasn't easy, Mary. Very, very difficult work.
Once Heuermann was identified as the person of interest,
we executed over 300 subpoenas, search warrants pertaining to this individual.
That allowed the task force to check Heuermann's phone records and his online activity.
In a 14-month period, he had over 200 searches pertaining to the Gilgo investigation.
And by using fake online profiles, Heuermann also allegedly searched for 6 subjects like torture porn and child porn.
He's a demon. He's an animal. He's just somebody that should not be around other human beings.
The affidavit revealed Heuermann was nailed with his own DNA and that of his wife. After collecting 11 bottles from the family trash in 2022, investigators swabbed them for genetic material. Lab results this year indicated female hairs found on 3 victims' bodies likely came from female DNA in the Heuermann household or car. The linchpin that sealed up the case happened when cops snatched a pizza box that Rex Heuermann allegedly tossed in a trash can near his Midtown office. When scientists tested the DNA recovered from the uneaten pizza crust, they say it matched DNA from the burlap used to wrap victim Megan Waterman.
When we come back.
So fascinating. And folks in the chat, I don't mean I will always support the police 100%, but I didn't do a good job in this calling balls and strikes. And when there's mistakes made, I got to point it out. And I gave them the benefit of the doubt. And one of the things it looks like in this case, I mean, this is the first time I heard right out of Rodney Harrison, there was one detective assigned to this case. I cannot believe that. I just cannot believe that this was a serial killer case and they had one, and he wasn't even full time. He was catching other cases. To me, that is outrageous. But look, the big question is going to be, look, the Suffolk County Police, under the direction and supervision of Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison, the Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney, the FBI, the state police, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. Let's face it, they did a great job in such a short time. They made up for lost time. Let's hope they did. Let's hope there was no more murders in the interim when this guy could have been caught. And that's the big thing that everyone's going to, of course, be looking into. Why wasn't the resources put into this case right away? You see what happened when the resources were put into it? 2 months later, they had the perp ID'd. Of course, they needed to do more work to seal his fate, and it's still not sealed now, but they had enough probable cause to make an arrest and charge him with 3 murders, and they're still working on this case. So those are the questions that need to be asked. Those are the questions I'm asking now. Those are the questions that I think we all have to ask. And this case, again, as I said, is not over, and the court part is just a bigger part as the rest of the investigation. Guys, we're at an hour and 23 minutes. We get carried away sometimes. We love this stuff so much. And I thought it was very informative tonight. And Mike, I'm going to go to you first. You give your final words, and then I'll go to Phil, and then we'll say good night to everyone.
Yeah, Bill, just for all the viewers, and especially Schmitty, thank you very much. But, to all the viewers that have faith in this task force and the work that they're doing. You could see that just putting together a task force that's well equipped, well resourced, how excellent the results could be. And so that although justice has been delayed for way too long for these young ladies and the families and of the victims, hopefully the justice will not be denied.
Well said, Phil.
I just want to thank everybody in the chat tonight. I was watching the chat a lot tonight. You still got me, Billy?
Yeah, I got you. You
got me? Okay.
Go ahead. I got you.
You're good. Bye.
There was a lot of great comments in the chat tonight. I want to say thank you to everybody. And I just want to be clear about one thing with Ray Tierney. He's probably a very capable district attorney. Rodney Harrison did state that they did a gang case together. So I don't think he's an amateur in any way, shape, or form. I just feel like he needs to pull back a little bit on the public appearances and discussing the case before it even goes to trial. God bless all the victims in this case, and God bless their families. And let's just hope and pray all the victims can find some solace and peace.
Well said, Phil. And we always like to shout out near the end to the Maureen Brainard-Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, Megan Waterman. Those have been the ones identified, and arrests were made in the 3, and hopefully an arrest will be made soon. The other victims, we're hoping for identifications and that they can link their deaths to Rex Heuermann. And folks, again, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. This is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. We'll see you on the next time. Till then, have a great night. God bless.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.